Dosm Rider Review.
Hey YouTube, Dosm Rider here with the next edition of Dosm's Rambles, this time for my Power Rangers Zeo rewatch. Yep, Die Ranger is still not here. But so yeah, if you watched my last one, you know that I have been doing a Power Rangers rewatch. So my last video was Mighty Morphin, and now it is Zeo. So I'm going to essentially structure this like last time and sort of go over plot characters. This one will probably be a little bit shorter since I don't have 3 whole seasons to go over. But enough of that. Well, I guess we'll just jump right in with Zeo, with sort of a general discussion about the story. I mentioned in Mighty Morphin how I really liked the foreshadowing to Zeo. They did a really good job of setting it up, I thought. And I thought the execution between the foreshadowing in Mighty Morphin and the beginning of Zeo was really well done. It was a really enjoyable premiere for me. It always has been. And I just love the way that it led into it. I mean, Mighty Morphin ended with the command center blowing up, and then at the beginning it doesn't look like, you know, Zordon and Alpha were there anymore, and it wasn't immediate, like you didn't come back instantly and they were like, oh, everything's fine. They had a few minutes of, you know, searching around the rubble and whatnot, and, you know, they found the Zeo Crystal, obviously, and it took them to underground, and then eventually the thing was rebuilt as the power chamber. But just the way it was done was so well done. The only real problem I had, it wasn't necessarily a problem, I find it more of a nitpick, was the way the Machine Empire was introduced. It was so sudden, and up to that point everything else had been so well set up with, like, you know, the Zeo powers and all that. And I guess it was supposed to be sudden, but it did just feel kind of strange because Zed and Rita had essentially won, and, you know, at the end of MMPR you're like, oh man, Zed and Rita won, the Rangers are powerless, what are they going to do? And then while the Rangers are getting their new powers, these new villains set up shop in the matter of like a day or less. So I don't know, I thought that could have been a little bit better done, but it's more of a nitpick than anything else. But like I said, the premiere was well done. I love the way the Zeo powers were set up. I love this whole vibe of this is the next generation, not next generation because they're not new people, but this is the next step in the history of the Power Rangers, and I love that they had the old suits behind them in the like little tubes. I thought it was really cool, kind of Batman type suit thing, and it just felt like the true next step to Power Rangers, and it was exciting. And even when you watch it now, you still get that kind of vibe. It was very exciting. The suits kind of had this perfect sort of Neo new look, Neo Zeo. It all worked out, and it was very exciting, I thought. I also love how Billy's like, Tanya, you can have my crystal. I'm like, Billy, you didn't even quest for that. I mean, technically Tanya's new here. But, let me just fix this a little bit because I'm getting a little blurry. But, her timeline was just ripped apart, so she gets this one. But yeah, so I thought the setup was really well done. And then after that, for quite some time, Zeo was primarily filler. And I'll say this, the filler was a lot more enjoyable than most of the MMPR filler, whether it be Season 1 or 2 or even some 3. So I thought the filler had improved. But still, it was a little bit annoying that after this huge build-up of, oh, it's the new generation of Power Rangers, and King Mondo's here, and he's got this huge army, and then after the first episode, it was dumb plots like, oh, we're going to steal the Ranger's pencil. And it's not like Power Rangers was never going to have those dumb plots, especially in the early days, but it was just such a shift from this new huge threat to dumb plots. So that was really my only complaint at that moment, because then after that, Zeo actually did get pretty good about having several story arcs going. I always liked Zeo when I was younger, but then the last few rewatches I remembered it being kind of boring filler, but it actually, I thought it did a good job of keeping the nice pace that MMPR Season 3 had, with multi-parters. So the first one, the main one, was Tommy's brother, which, to be honest, I actually found that storyline a little boring, but I really appreciated the fact that they set it up back in MMPR when Tommy found his Zeo Crystal. So that was really cool, that fact with the arrowhead and everything, that they actually set that up quite a while ago. But the whole story itself, I really didn't find that interesting. I'm not really a fan of Tommy's brother's character. I thought he was kind of boring. But at least it was something more entertaining than filler. And I appreciated the setup to it and everything, and that was more entertaining. And then we get into what I think is like the bulk of Zeo, which was actually Zeo. The bulk of Zeo is Zeo. No, which was the Gold Ranger. Now, the Gold Ranger had some sort of messy stuff going on in a sense. The Gold Ranger's introduction was really cool. He came in, he had this cool voice, this cool costume, and it was a mystery. And I thought the whole mystery aspect of it was really well done because it went on for a while, which was nice. And they had all kinds of red herrings. I mean, Billy was such a red herring to the fact that Rocky called him out in show. He's like, "Come on, Sid." And then there was that one brief moment where you thought maybe it's Skull because he was right by the area, or Tommy's brother was another red herring for it. And then it wound up being Trey, this weird little dude from Triforia that's triplets. I was kind of disappointed by the reveal. I don't hate Trey, but I really don't care for him. Now, I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. Over the next couple of seasons, when I talk about these, there's all kinds of different stories and theories about what went on. And I know that David Yost' Billy didn't stay on because of behind-the-scenes drama, but I don't know if they ever had planned to make him the Gold Ranger, either as the reveal or as the second one. But I wish he kind of had been. But I thought he kind of deserved it, and I'll probably get into that more in characters. But it was a little bit of a disappointment for me that it was Trey, because it was just somebody random. But still, it worked out okay, and the way Jason took the powers I thought was cool. And that was a really cool little arc. It kind of intermingled with some filler, but I liked the way they stretched it out, and it kind of gave this sort of main little plot to follow. And then after that, you know, you had King Mondo like leaving to repair himself after being blown up, and then his son coming in, that's a weird way of saying it, coming in Gasket, and then you have that, which is a really good multi-parter, which is King for a Day, which started with Where in the World is Zeo Ranger number 5, and that was a really cool little interesting multi-parter. I really appreciated that they remembered that Jason felt bad from when he previously had let Tommy down when he was the Green Ranger, and that they kind of brought that up when he was looking for him. And it kind of gave, you know, Tommy the chance to sort of play a version of evil Tommy. But that was a pretty good story arc, too. And for the most part, intermingled in some filler, they had some good two-parters that led up to it, I thought. I think the main letdown was at the end. The final arc was essentially Jason rejecting the Gold Ranger powers because they weren't necessarily built for him. And I like the way it was done. Maybe it could have been brought up an episode or two before, but I like the fact that it was still closer to when he was going to lose his powers. I'm doing a lot of quotes in this one. Like with Tommy's, they dragged it out for so long, and he was so whiny, and was falling over, and it was such a long ordeal that I like that they put the Gold Rangers closer together so you weren't dealing with this weaker version of the Ranger for so long. But the last arc was essentially that, and he was losing his powers, and Trey returned, and they took him back via like lightning or something, and then they grew giant and blew up the Machine Empire, but they really didn't because they repaired themselves, and then Zed and Rita blew them up. It was super awkward. Zeo started really strong, and was very, in my opinion, a very solid series story-wise. They had dumb PR filler, but the filler was more entertaining. I particularly really loved the Halloween episode. It came from Angel Grove or something, but that's one of my favorite PR Halloween episodes. That's a side note. But it was overall a solid and enjoyable season, and it seemed to take the things I like about MMPR Season 3 with the more consistent writing. And it unfortunately got a really awkward ending. I'll probably get a little more into this in my Turbo ramble about how awkward the transition for Zeo and Turbo was. But Zeo did not get the proper finale it deserved. Essentially, it was just super awkward, and like the whole growing large to, it seemed weird. I'm gonna assume they did it because they didn't have American Zeozord suits, because they had them for Season 3, and then I know they had it for Turbo, at least for the Turbo Megazord. So I'm gonna assume that's why they did that. I could be wrong, but it was just super awkward and quick. It's like, alright, Jason switches powers back. Now let's defeat the Machine Empire real quick. Like I said, I'll probably go over a little bit more of the sort of transition in the next vlog, but unfortunately Zeo's finale was very anticlimactic, and almost not even a real finale that it deserved. To quickly now move into characters, let's start, I guess, with Tommy. Actually, let's go in number order, why not? Let's Catherine. I really like Catherine. I mentioned that in the last video. I think in Zeo, she had more of a chance to grow into her character. You had very little time with her as an adult in the end of MMPR, and she didn't do anything amazing and didn't have any character arcs that were memorable or just really anything that stood out too much. But I like her overall personality. She was really nice, and sweet, and that sounds really funny, like, but it's just, she was really likable, I guess what I'm getting at, and I liked her with Tommy more than Kim, and I forgot to mention in the story thing, is they did have that whole Dear John letter thing, which was also a storyline, and I don't know, I just really found her likable, and I feel in this season we got more of a sense of who Catherine was, because she had more of a chance to grow. And then we have Tanya, who's a new character who only came in at the end of MMPR, and she had a very strange introduction. It's really weird and timey-wimey, and it doesn't entirely make sense, and they kind of had to do it quick, I guess. It was kind of a really dumb explanation, but for how dumb she got here, though, I actually like Tanya quite a bit. Out of that whole era of MMPR through Zio, between Trini, Aisha, and Tanya, Tanya's probably my favorite. Like Kat, she didn't necessarily do anything extraordinary. She had a storyline with her parents when she found him, which was nice. But there wasn't any big moment. But I just really liked her personality. She really, she stood out personality-wise, and she really stuck up for herself. And she, you know, was, I don't want to say outspoken, but she really stood up for herself. And I really appreciated that about her. And, like, especially, she had sort of a minor B-plot with his boyfriend early on, and she really, you know, stood up to him. And, I don't know, she just really stood out for me. I like her personality a lot. And then we got Rocky, who essentially remains Rocky. The blue color sort of definitely fit him better, considering the role the Red Ranger took in MMPR. And he didn't do too much either. I did appreciate that when Jason came in, there was that episode about where he felt replaced. Because, you know, he replaced Jason and now he's back. And it wasn't really a fully realized arc or anything, but I appreciate that they sort of brought that up. And Rocky was okay. He almost kind of got on my nerves a little more in Zio. I don't know how quite to put my finger on it, but he was alright. And then you got Adam, who is a fairly stoic character. He did start to come out of his shell more. Across all the seasons, he did start to have a little more of a personality. But like I mentioned in my MMPR Ramble, I do enjoy Adam. And I liked, it was sort of a subtle thing that you just saw occasionally. More so at the beginning, I felt. But Adam was sort of training Tanya in martial arts and sort of, it seemed like, you know, getting her acclimated in Angel Grove, which I thought was nice. And then Tommy probably had the most arcs. Wow, it keeps getting really blurry on and off. I don't know what's causing that, because it never happened before, but I'm sorry about that. You know, with his brother and then with King for a Day, he didn't really grow or change much. He was essentially just Tommy, and I really don't have too much to say other than I still do like the character. And as I mentioned with Trey, I really wasn't too huge a fan of him. I thought it was just kind of a weird concept of like a species that get sick by splitting into triplets. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't hate him, but I don't have too much to say, and I really didn't like him that much either. Now, Jason, I mentioned in my last one that I really wasn't a huge fan of Jason, but I actually liked Jason quite a bit in this series. I actually really liked him as the Gold Ranger. And I think it was because Power Rangers had matured a little bit, not in the sense that it was dark or anything, but I mean, it kind of grew into its own show. Back when he was on, when he left was essentially in almost a transitionary period where it was some less of the heavy laying on morals, and it became more of its own show with this storyline. The writing was better. I thought that the characters felt more natural, and so he was able to be much more of a fleshed out character where he felt more natural, and he really fit in well with the Zeo Rangers, I felt, and I just liked him overall more. He was kind of badass, and he was just an overall like good guy, and I don't know, it's hard to describe. I thought that he felt like more of a fleshed out character, I guess, and I just enjoyed him more. I thought he was a good fit for Gold. I was kind of torn because, as I said, and I'll mention again when I talk about Billy here in a second, I think Billy should have been Gold, but I also really liked Jason as Gold. And I thought he was a good choice in the sense that I liked that him coming back made the transition feel less quick. Like, at the time, I didn't notice how quick the transition really happened between the three Rangers, but it made it feel connected to that past and that wasn't forgotten, and that he really would come back as a Ranger. So I thought it was a good choice, and he fit in really well with the team. He had sort of a side story with his girlfriend, or what would be girlfriend, that worked for Ernie. But overall, I found him enjoyable, and I thought he was a good choice for the Gold Ranger. And despite the sort of potential background problems between the actors, Jason and Tommy were really good friends, and they worked well as friends. And I mentioned before, I appreciated that they remembered stuff like that Jason felt guilty about his role in Tommy losing his powers. So that was nice. I overall really did like Jason. Now let me get to Billy. Billy, another thing, I keep bringing back my old ramble, but as I mentioned in MMPR, I wasn't a fan of Billy at all in Season 1, but I grew to really like him. And Season 3 Billy and Zeo Billy, more so in the beginning was around, was actually one of my favorite characters. I thought he really grew. He really stepped up as this leader, and he made a huge sort of sacrifice by stepping down to work at Command Center, and it was clear a lot that he really wished he could have been out there, and unfortunately there was the story of him not being able to take the gold powers because of something that happened with the Command Center. Now that was highlighted. When the Command Center blew up at that MMPR, you saw the blast, so I don't know whether that was a failsafe in case he couldn't be a ranger, or how far they planned that, or what any of their intentions were, if at all, to make him the Gold Ranger, because I know that he sort of abruptly left. But I really, part of me does wish he would have been the Gold Ranger, or, you know, maybe Phantom later, I don't know, but he really, being the Gold Ranger, I thought would have really brought his arc full circle, and I thought he really deserved it and would have made a good Gold Ranger. And I really liked Billy in this season. I mean, he had that story where he sort of went off exploring to Aquitar, and I just found him to be a lot more of an enjoyable character, and I thought that he just deserved to be a ranger again, because he was a really good hero, and unfortunately had a rushed exit that involved, it was kind of a smart move. I mean, not him leaving, but I mean the way they wrote it, with him aging rapidly because of the machine. Like, very quick thinking on that. But unfortunately had a rushed exit. I just really wish we could have seen more from Billy, and maybe had him ranger up one more time. And I just really liked him in Zeo a lot. And like I said, I'm really torn because I wish he would have become Gold, but I liked Jason as Gold. Maybe I'll talk a bit more about maybe he should have been Phantom, because that was potentially planned at a time. But yeah, I really liked Billy and thought I wish that behind the scenes stuff hadn't happened, so he could have been around more. There's not too much else to talk about. Zordon and Alpha are the same. You have Arc, which is essentially almost like Ninjor, who didn't appear much. Like I said, I didn't care for Tommy's brother. Bulk and Skull, which I didn't mention actually so much in the MMPR Ramble, I really enjoyed a lot as they went on. In the early seasons, I did not like the whole, oh my god, I have pie in my face, dumb humor, but they really grew and changed a lot, actually more than the majority of the Rangers. And their being junior police and being detectives was probably my favorite era of them. There was still some of that dumb, you know, oh, I got stuff on me humor, but I found them to be a lot more enjoyable, and took advantage of some more comedic things, and there was really not a whole lot to say other than I appreciated that they grew and changed, and I did always enjoy them when they were on, and like I said, they did get better as it went. I'm sorry if you can hear barking downstairs. Sorry about that, I had to cut away for a second because my dog wouldn't stop barking. But anyway, I think I was talking about Bulk and Skull. My main point is I like them. I don't want to go on too much about stuff other than saying I like them. Now, villains, we have essentially just the Machine Empire, which, to be honest, I really didn't care for all that much. At the very beginning, they gave you the sense that it was this huge wave of enemies, and after the beginning of the show, I never really got this sense of threat. I mean, there was a few occasions where they had some decent plans, and there was a lot, you know, talk of like an in-scale, or a large-scale army, in-scale army. Their ship was a model as big as this. Anyway, sorry. But I never really got the sense of threat from them. Character-wise, they never really did much for me. They all essentially had distinct personalities. You know, you got Mondo, Machina, Clank Orbis, and then Sprocket, and later Gasket. But they never really stood out quite as much as Rita and everyone did. I mean, they got pretty comedic and campy later, but they're outside of... I always just kind of group them together as this clump, and they never really sort of left this impression on me. As villains. And like I said, I never got the sense of threat from them, especially since at the end of MMPR, Zed, Rita, and Master Vile had the Rangers' backs to the wall multiple times, and they ultimately won. So there was this real sense of threat and urgency. And then we open with Zeo, and they're like, oh man, this threat's so good, or so bad, they're scaring even Rita and Zed, who just won off the planet, and then there were a bunch of dumb plans. So I never really got this sense of threat from them, which was one of my main complaints about Zeo, was that they didn't continue that. I mean, I didn't expect the Rangers to have their backs to the wall the whole series, but at least make the threat feel like what you said it was. And speaking of Zed and Rita and company, they came back. They left at the very beginning and then came back later. Goldar and Rito had this storyline with Bulk and Skull where they were kind of their slaves, which was kind of funny. That could have been interesting, I think, if they would have had Zed, Rita, and Mondo Machine at the same time, sort of competing. Now, obviously, because of footage, they had mainly machine monsters. They did have that rocket, Johnny Louis Kaboom or whatever, that Zed and Rita made, but nothing really ever came of that. That was wasted potential. But Anyway, if they hadn't relied so much on footage, that actually could have been really neat. Yeah, I just really never felt that sense of urgency to it. Speaking of footage real quick, before I get to the wrap-up, I just want to say I do appreciate that despite the fact that they now had full ability to use footage from a Sentai series, because the last series, with the exception of the Alien Rangers arc, they were just using mech fights exclusively and made their own footage. And I appreciate the fact that even though now they were able to completely use any O-Ranger footage, they didn't stop making quite a large amount of original fight footage. The fights back then weren't incredible, but they were still entertaining and they looked a lot better, so I appreciate the fact that they didn't cut them out entirely, and there was actually quite a bit of original fight footage, so I'm glad that they didn't, go fully back to Sentai footage like they did in the first season of MMPR. But anyway, to wrap it up, because I don't want this to get too long, I overall enjoyed Zeo. I think it's a very solid series, and unfortunately had a messy end and some messy production problems a little bit. And it's far from perfect. Like MMPR, there's some really dumb, sometimes hard to sit through parts. But for the most part, I did enjoy myself. I think it's a solid series, and I think ultimately, with the exception of the end and transition later being kind of crappy, it was a great follow-up to MMPR because it kept the same vibe and structure that you come to know, but it also started to change things and do things different. So it felt like this great sequel to it, and this great, it felt like this great next step, which I thought it was really well done, the transition at least. And unfortunately, they wouldn't continue that later. But for the most part, Zeo is solid. So if you want to revisit it, it's a solid show. And if you're going through a rewatch, Zeo is certainly a better spot, and I enjoyed it. I just wish it had gotten a better end, and there was a few small things I would have changed. But anyway, that about wraps it up for this one. Next time, look forward to Turbo. As of this recording, I am about halfway through, so in about a week or two, depending on when I get it filmed, Turbo. And MMPR and Zeo have been majority positive. I think there'll be a little more negativity in Turbo, but yeah. So look forward to that. I think that's about it. Until next time, Dosm Rider, signing out.